There's a lie that every civilization tells itself right before it dies. You can hear it in the speeches of their leaders. You can read it in their newspapers. You can see it in the arrogance of their architecture. The lie is 3 words long. We are different. They look at the ruins of the empires that came before them and they scoff. They say, those people were primitive. They didn't have our armies. They didn't have our economy. They didn't have our technology. But they are wrong. Technology is not your savior. Technology is not a tool you keep in a box. Technology is a predator. We are taught that empires fall because of war, or bad politics, or moral decay. These are just symptoms. If you look at the timeline of human history, really look at it, you will find a terrifying pattern. The great superpowers of history were not defeated by armies. They were defeated by a shift in technology that they refused to understand until it was too late. Today, the United States dollar is the most powerful weapon on earth. It controls the price of your food, the value of your labor, and the destiny of nations. It feels permanent. It feels immovable. But 600 years ago, a stone wall felt immovable. 500 years ago, a handwritten Bible felt immovable. 1,000 years ago, paper money felt like a miracle. They were all wrong. In this analysis, we're going to dissect the 3 moments in history where a single technological invention erased a superpower overnight. And then, we're going to show you why the exact same mechanism is currently dismantling the US dollar. The clock has already started. Welcome to the end of the era. Let's begin with the first lesson, the illusion of safety. To understand this, we have to go back to the year 1453 and the city of Constantinople. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople was the center of the world. It was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the last surviving remnant of Rome. It held the vastest libraries, the most gold, and the most powerful secrets of the ancient world. But its true power wasn't its gold. It was its walls. The Theodosian walls were a marvel of engineering, a triple-layer defense system that had never been breached. Armies from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East had smashed themselves against these stones for centuries and failed. To the people inside the city, these walls were a fact of physics. They believed that as long as the walls stood, their empire was eternal. They had absolute security. Does that sound familiar? Today, the United States relies on a different kind of wall. It's called the network effect. Everyone uses the dollar, so everyone must use the dollar. The global banking system, SWIFT, is a fortress that keeps enemies out and locks value in. The U.S. government believes that because the dollar is the world reserve currency, it is unassailable. They believe they have a monopoly on safety. But in 1452, a Hungarian engineer named Orban walked up to the gates of Constantinople. Orban was a technician, a founder. He had developed a new technology, a bronze casting technique that could create a cannon of impossible size. He offered his services to the Emperor of Constantinople. He said, "I can build you a weapon that will change war." The Emperor looked at his massive walls. He looked at his treasury, and he said, "No. Why spend money on new technology when you already have the ultimate defense?" The Emperor was suffering from the incumbency bias. He thought the old rules would last forever. So, Orban went to the competition. He went to the 21-year-old Sultan, Mehmed II, the leader of the Ottoman Turks. Mehmed didn't have the history. He didn't have the prestige. But he had an open mind. He asked Orban, "Can this cannon cast a stone that can smash the walls of the city?" Orban replied, "I can cast a stone that would smash the walls of Babylon." The result was the basilica, a 27-foot-long monster, the first weapon of mass destruction. On April 6, 1453, the bombardment began. For the people inside Constantinople, it was a psychological apocalypse. They had spent a millennium trusting in stone. They had built their entire military strategy, their entire economy, and their entire worldview on the premise that walls work. But technology had changed the physics of war. The walls didn't just fail. They became obsolete instantly. The city that had stood for 1,000 years fell in less than 2 months. The empire ended not because they lacked courage, but because they ignored a technological shift. They bet on static defense in a world of kinetic offense. This is exactly where the US dollar stands today. The US government uses the dollar as a weapon of siege warfare. Through sanctions, they can cut off any nation from the global financial system. They are hiding behind the walls of SWIFT. They think this power is absolute. But Orban has already arrived. Satoshi Nakamoto didn't build a cannon of bronze. He built a cannon of code. Cryptocurrency and decentralized finance are the basilica cannon. They render the walls of the banking system irrelevant. If you can move value from person A to person B without going through the gatekeeper no longer has an empire. The US government is currently trying to regulate crypto, ban it, or co-opt it. They are trying to patch the cracks in the wall. But they are missing the point. The physics of money have changed. The wall is already broken. If the fall of Constantinople teaches us about the loss of security, our Second Empire teaches us about the loss of control. This brings us to Western Europe in the 15th century. Before the internet, before the television, before the newspaper, there was the church. The Catholic Church was not just a religion. It was an information empire. It was the Google, the CNN, and the Harvard of the Middle Ages combined. Their power relied on a specific technological bottleneck, the manuscript. To produce a single book took months of manual labor. Because books were rare, they were expensive. Because they were expensive, only the elite could own them. And because the Bible was written in Latin, a language the common people didn't speak, the church possessed a monopoly on truth. They were the only ones who knew what the ledger said. If they said, "Give us your money, and your sins will be forgiven," you had to pay. You couldn't check the source code. You couldn't verify the transaction. This allowed them to monetize salvation. They sold indulgences, literally, receipts for the forgiveness of sins. It was a financial racket built on information asymmetry. They were the central bank of morality. But in 1440, in a small workshop in Germany, a goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg accidentally destroyed this monopoly. Gutenberg didn't set out to destroy the church. He just wanted to make money printing Bibles. But the technology he created, movable type, did something the church couldn't stop. It lowered the cost of verification. Suddenly, the Word of God wasn't scarce. It was abundant. Bibles were printed in German, French, and English. People could buy them. People could read them. And when they read them, they realized something terrifying. They realized the church had been lying to them. Nowhere in the book did it say you had to pay the Pope to get into heaven. The ledger was open. The monopoly was broken. This triggered the Protestant Reformation. It wasn't just a religious argument. It was a decentralization event. Europe fragmented. The unified power of the Holy Roman Empire shattered into hundreds of competing states. The gatekeepers of truth lost their jobs because the technology made the truth peer-to-peer. Now, look at the Federal Reserve. What are they? They are the high priests of the economy. They meet in secret committees. They speak in a complicated language that the common person doesn't understand. Quantitative easing, yield curve control, reverse repo. And most importantly, they control the ledger. They tell us that inflation is transitory. They tell us that printing trillions of dollars is necessary. And like the peasants of the 15th century, we have to trust them. We cannot audit the Federal. We cannot check the gold in Fort Knox. We have to take their word for it. But the printing press of finance has arrived. The blockchain is not just money. It is a time-stamped, immutable, public ledger. It is the first time in human history that we can have a financial system without a pope. Just as Gutenberg allowed the people to verify the word of God for themselves, the blockchain allows the people to verify the supply of money for themselves. With Bitcoin, you know exactly how many coins exist. You know exactly when they will be mined. You don't need a chairman to tell you. The church didn't disappear after the printing press, but it lost its empire. It lost its ability to command the world. The central banks are about to undergo the same reformation. The technology of distributed truth is incompatible with the business model of centralized lies. This brings us to the third and final empire, the empire that looks the most like us, the British Empire. If Constantinople was about security, and the church was about information, the British Empire is about scale and reserve status. In the year 1900, the sun truly never set on the British Empire. It was the largest empire in human history. And at the center of that empire was the pound sterling. It was the global reserve currency. If you were a merchant in Brazil selling coffee to a merchant in Germany, you settled the payment in British pounds. Why? Because Britain controlled the trade routes, and Britain controlled the energy. The British Empire was built on coal and steam. They had the best navy because they had the best coaling stations. They had the best factories because they had the best steam engines. The pound sterling was effectively an energy credit backed by British coal. They were the masters of the industrial age. They believed that their dominance was a permanent feature of the world map. But underneath their feet, the ground was shifting. A new energy source was emerging: oil. The British Admiralty made a fateful decision in the early 20th century to switch their navy from coal to oil. It made the ships faster, but it introduced a fatal strategic flaw. Britain had plenty of coal, but it had no oil. They had to import it. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a sleeping giant was waking up. The United States of America was not just sitting on oil, it was swimming in it. The technology of the 20th century, the internal combustion engine, the automobile, the tank, the airplane, ran on oil, and the U.S. controlled the oil. The collapse of the British pound as the world reserve currency didn't happen because of a single battle. It happened because the technological substrate of the global economy changed from solid fuel, coal, to liquid fuel, oil. The currency that controlled the new fuel became the new master. By the time World War II ended, the transfer was complete. At the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, the British pound was dethroned, and the U.S. dollar was crowned. Why does this matter today? Because we are currently undergoing a shift as significant as coal to oil. We are moving from the petrodollar to the digital dollar. The age of oil is slowly yielding to the age of information and electricity. The U.S. dollar's value has been anchored to oil since the 1970s. This is the petrodollar system. You want oil. You must buy dollars to pay for it. This creates artificial demand for the dollar. But look at the new technology stack. Solar, wind, nuclear, and battery storage are localizing energy production. The need to ship liquid fuel across oceans is peaking. At the same time, the lubricant of global trade is no longer just oil. It is data. It is microchips. It is computing power. The U.S. dollar is an analog currency trying to run a digital world. It is slow. It takes days to settle international wire transfers. It is expensive. It is full of friction. Just as the pound sterling could not keep up with the speed of an oil-based economy, the U.S. dollar cannot keep up with the speed of an AI-driven, automated, blockchain-based economy. We are seeing the rise of energy money. Bitcoin is literally mined using electricity. It is a direct conversion of energy into value, without a government intermediary. It represents the new technological standard. The British elite in 1920 laughed at the Americans and their dirty oil. They held onto their clean coal and their polite traditions. But the market doesn't care about tradition. The market cares about efficiency. So, let's synthesize these three collapses. Constantinople fell because it relied on walls in an age of cannons. The church fell because it relied on secrets in an age of print. The British Empire fell because it relied on coal in an age of oil. Now, look at the United States. It is relying on financial walls, sanctions, in an age of digital cannons, crypto. It is relying on financial secrets, the Fed's ledger, in an age of distributed truth, blockchain. It is relying on an analog settlement layer, SWIFT, in an age of digital immediacy. The U.S. dollar is currently fighting a war on three fronts, and it is using weapons from the last century. They are trying to legislate relevance. They are passing laws to make the dollar competitive. But you cannot legislate physics. You cannot pass a law that says water must flow uphill. And you cannot pass a law that says centralized, inflationary paper money is better than decentralized, deflationary hard money. The tragedy of the American empire is that it actually invented the technology that will destroy it. The internet, encryption, the microchip, these were American inventions. But just like the British invented the steamships that would eventually require the oil they didn't have, America built the digital infrastructure that requires a form of money they cannot control. We are entering the transition phase. This is the most dangerous time in history. When an empire realizes its technology is obsolete, it doesn't go quietly. It lashes out. We will see increased surveillance. We will see the implementation of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, which are nothing more than a digital version of the Theodosian walls. They will try to lock us inside a closed system. They will try to ban the exits. But to truly understand the endgame, we must look beyond the what and understand the how. History does not just repeat, it accelerates. The most dangerous aspect of this technological shift is not the shift itself, but the speed at which it is happening. We are victim to a cognitive bias known as linear thinking in an exponential world. When the printing press was invented, it took decades for the information to spread across Europe. When the steam engine was invented, it took a generation to retool the factories. But the digital revolution does not move at the speed of horse carts or steamships. It moves at the speed of light. The collapse of the US dollar's dominance will not be a 50-year decline like the British pound. It will be a phase change, like water turning to ice. It stays liquid at 33 degrees, and it is solid at 32. This brings us to the specific mechanism of the dollar's demise, the sovereign debt death spiral. This is where the technology of the internet collides with the mathematics of the debt. In the old world, information was slow. If the government printed too much money, or if inflation was rising, the average citizen wouldn't realize it for months. The government could hide the data. They could manipulate the consumer price index. They could use their monopoly on truth to calm the markets. But in the age of the smartphone, information is instantaneous. Every citizen is a trader. Every citizen has a Bloomberg terminal in their pocket. When the Federal Reserve makes a mistake now, the market reacts in milliseconds. We saw this in 2023 with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. In the past, a bank run involved people physically lining up around the block. That gave the government time to react. It gave them time to close the doors and issue statements. But the run on Silicon Valley Bank happened on Twitter and banking apps. $42 billion left the bank in a single afternoon. It was the first digital bank run. Now scale that up. Imagine a digital run not on a bank, but on the currency itself. This is the nightmare scenario for the Federal Reserve. They know that trust is fragile. They know that once the psychology shifts, the technology allows for a mass exodus. If 100 million Americans decide to convert 5% of their savings into gold, Bitcoin, or foreign assets on the same day, the system collapses instantly. The digital gates are too wide. The flow is too fast. So, how does a dying empire respond to a technological threat it cannot compete with? It doesn't try to build a better product. It tries to build a better cage. This is the birth of the central bank digital currency, or CBDC. You must understand that a CBDC is not money in the traditional sense. It is a control grid masquerading as convenience. The U.S. government realizes that the dollar is losing the technological war against crypto and decentralized finance. They cannot win on features. Bitcoin is faster, scarcer, and more secure. So, they will try to win on force. They are building a digital version of the Theodosian walls. A CBDC allows the government to program the money. They can impose expiration dates on your stimulus checks to force you to spend. They can geofence your money, so it only works within 5 miles of your home. They can automatically deduct taxes before you even see your paycheck. But most importantly, they can block you from the exits. The ultimate goal of a CBDC is to prevent you from moving your capital into the rival system. They want to cut the bridge to the Basilica Canon. They want to burn the Gutenberg Bibles. We are moving toward a world of bifurcation. Two separate economies running in parallel. On one side, you will have the white market. This is the government-approved economy. It will run on CBDCs. It will be highly surveilled, highly taxed, and highly regulated. To participate, you will need a digital ID. Your carbon footprint will be tracked. Your political purchases will be monitored. It will be safe, but it will be a cage. The currency in this system will continue to lose value, bleeding purchasing power to pay for the debts of the state. On the other side, you will have the gray market. This is the economy of the people. It will run on decentralized protocols. It will use Bitcoin, stablecoins, and tokenized gold. It will be encrypted, peer-to-peer, and borderless. This economy will be demonized by the state. They will call it the dark web. They will say it is for criminals and terrorists, just as the church called the printed Bibles heresy, and the Ottomans called the canon barbaric. But here is the irony. The gray market will be the only place where free trade actually exists. It will be the only place where your purchasing power is preserved. The conflict between these two systems will define the next 20 years of human history, and the United States is finding itself in the uncomfortable position of being the anti-innovation superpower. For the last century, America was the home of the future. It welcomed the best minds. It built the internet. But now, to protect the privilege of the dollar, it is being forced to ban innovation. It is being forced to drive the crypto industry offshore. It is forcing the Orbans of the world to go to Dubai, to Singapore, to El Salvador. This is the classic innovator's dilemma. The incumbent has too much to lose, so they refuse to change. The disruption comes from the outside. We must also look at the geopolitical layer. It is not just individuals exiting the dollar, it is nations. This is the de-dollarization trend. For decades, countries like China, Russia, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia held U.S. debt, treasury bonds, as their savings. They trusted the empire. But in 2022, when the U.S. seized the foreign reserves of Russia, a message was sent to the world. Your money is only your money if we agree with your politics. That was the moment the trust in politicians broke globally. Now, these nations are looking for a technology that is neutral. They are buying gold at record rates, the highest levels since 1950. But they are also looking at digital payment rails that bypass SWIFT. They are building their own cannons. This brings us back to the math. The United States is currently $34 trillion in debt. The interest payments on that debt are exploding. To pay the interest, the government must print more money. This creates inflation. To fight inflation, they raise interest rates. Higher rates mean higher interest payments on the debt, which means they have to print more money. It is a doom loop, a mathematical cul-de-sac. There is no political solution to this. You cannot vote your way out of a debt spiral. You can only innovate your way out, or default your way out. The government has chosen the path of soft default, inflating the currency away until it is worthless, while using the CBDC to keep the population trapped in the burning building. So, what does the collapse actually look like for you? It won't look like a Hollywood movie with zombies in the streets, at least, not at first. It will look like shrinkflation on steroids. It will look like the price of meat doubling every 2 years. It will look like your pension fund being solvent on paper, but unable to buy a loaf of bread. It will look like a QR code on your phone that turns red if you try to buy something the government doesn't like. It will feel like a slow, suffocating tightening of the screw. But birth is painful. The transition from the Roman Empire to the medieval kingdoms was chaotic. The transition from feudalism to capitalism was bloody. The transition we are in now will be volatile. The US dollar is the Titanic. It has hit the iceberg. The math has already determined the outcome. The band is still playing. The politicians are still giving speeches about how unsinkable the ship is. They are rearranging the deck chairs. But you have a choice. You can stay on the ship, hoping the government will save you. Or you can look at the lifeboats. The lifeboats are built of new technology. They are scary to some. They require you to take personal responsibility. There is no customer service department for a gold bar buried in your backyard. There is no forgot password link for your Bitcoin wallet. You have to become sovereign. You have to become your own bank. This is the price of freedom. The three empires we discussed, Constantinople, the Church, the British Empire, they all fell because they became arrogant. They stopped adapting. They thought their past success guaranteed their future survival. Do not make the same mistake with your own life. Do not assume that because the dollar has been strong for your entire life, it will be strong tomorrow. The cannon is at the gate. The printing press is running. The fuel is changing. The cycle is complete. The technology has arrived. The empire is over. The only question left is, are you prepared for what comes next?